You know that moment when you're lying in bed at 3 in the morning, replaying every conversation, every broken promise, every time you ignored your gut feeling because you wanted so badly to believe he would change. That crushing weight in your chest that makes it hard to breathe. The shame that burns through you when you realize you gave everything to someone who gave you crumbs in return. You've spent months, maybe years, bending yourself into shapes that don't fit your soul, silencing your voice, dimming your light, all while telling yourself that love requires sacrifice. And then one day, something shifts. Not because the pain finally stops, but because you decide you're done being destroyed by it. This is the story of every woman who has ever looked at her reflection and barely recognized the exhausted stranger staring back. The woman who finally said enough and discovered that her breaking point was actually her breakthrough. The psychology behind transforming pain into power isn't some mystical process reserved for extraordinarily strong women. It's a specific series of mental shifts that happens when you stop running from your suffering and start using it as fuel. When a woman finally hits rock bottom in a relationship that has been slowly killing her spirit, her brain undergoes a radical recalibration that psychologists call post-traumatic growth. This isn't just about healing or moving on. It's about fundamentally rewiring the neural pathways that kept her trapped in patterns of self-abandonment. The woman who emerges from this process isn't the same person who entered it. She has accessed parts of herself that were dormant, sometimes for her entire life. For months or years, she has been operating in survival mode, her nervous system flooded with cortisol, her mind constantly scanning for threats, her body tense with hypervigilance. She has been so focused on managing his moods, predicting his reactions, and preventing conflict that she has become a stranger to her own needs, desires, and boundaries. But when the pain becomes unbearable, when the cognitive dissonance between what she knows and what she accepts finally creates an internal earthquake, something extraordinary happens. The psychological defenses that kept her locked in denial begin to crumble, and for the first time in a long time, she sees the situation with brutal clarity. This moment of awakening is both devastating and liberating. Devastating because she has to confront the full weight of what she has tolerated, the ways she has betrayed herself, the time she can never get back. Liberating because clarity is power, and once you see the truth, you can never fully unsee it. The woman who transforms her pain into power understands that this clarity is her greatest asset. She stops trying to convince herself that things weren't that bad, that she's being too sensitive, that everyone has problems. She allows herself to feel the full spectrum of her emotions without judgment, the rage at being deceived, the grief for the relationship she thought she had, the shame for not leaving sooner. By allowing herself to fully experience these emotions instead of suppressing them, she begins to metabolize the trauma rather than storing it in her body. She recognizes that every tear she cries is washing away another layer of illusion. Every sleepless night is her mind processing what her heart couldn't accept. Every moment of despair is bringing her closer to the woman she's meant to become. The transformation from victim to victor requires a fundamental shift in how a woman perceives her pain. Instead of seeing it as evidence of her unworthiness or as punishment for her mistakes, she begins to view it as information. Pain is data. It tells you where your boundaries were violated, where you abandoned yourself, where you settled for less than you deserve. The woman who harnesses this information doesn't waste energy asking why this happened to her. She asks what this experience is teaching her about herself, about relationships, about the red flags she will never ignore again. She becomes a student of her own suffering, extracting every lesson, identifying every pattern, documenting every warning sign she missed. This isn't about self-blame, it's about self-knowledge. She studies the psychology of manipulation, not to become manipulative herself, but to become immune to it. She learns about narcissism, gaslighting, love bombing, intermittent reinforcement, trauma bonding, not as abstract concepts, but as the exact tactics that were used to keep her trapped. Have you ever noticed how the women who have truly transformed their pain into power carry themselves differently? There's a quiet confidence, an unshakable knowing, a refusal to accept anything less than what they deserve. This isn't arrogance. It's the natural result of having survived something that could have destroyed them and choosing to let it strengthen them instead. Comment below if you've ever felt like your pain was trying to teach you something bigger than the situation itself. If you've experienced that moment when everything suddenly makes sense. Just write, "My pain became my teacher." Your story might be exactly what another woman needs to hear right now, to know she's not alone in this journey. The psychology of resilience shows us that the most powerful transformations happen when a woman stops trying to return to who she was before the pain and instead commits to becoming someone entirely new. She understands that healing isn't about going back, it's about going forward. The old version of herself was the one who tolerated disrespect, ignored red flags, and prioritized his comfort over her own well-being. Why would she want to return to that? Instead, she consciously designs the woman she's becoming. She identifies the beliefs that kept her small and systematically dismantles them. She notices the voice in her head that says she's too much or not enough and replaces it with truth. The woman who truly transforms understands that freedom isn't just physical, it's mental and emotional. She evicts him from every corner of her consciousness. She stops checking his social media, stops asking mutual friends about him, stops hoping he'll realize what he lost. She redirects all that energy toward building a life so fulfilling that his absence becomes a blessing rather than a loss. The woman who transforms pain into power also understands something crucial about masculine psychology that most women never learn. She realizes that many men are drawn to women who are slightly broken, who seek validation, who can be molded, who will tolerate poor treatment, because they've been conditioned to believe love requires suffering. But here's what shifts when a woman claims her power. She becomes allergic to this dynamic. Her nervous system, which has been trained to recognize the signs of emotional manipulation, sends up red flags immediately. She doesn't ignore them, minimize them, or rationalize them away. She trusts her body's wisdom. She understands that the right relationship should feel like peace, not anxiety. Like expansion, not contraction. Like coming home to herself, not losing herself. She stops being attracted to potential and starts requiring proof. She stops accepting words without matching actions. She stops giving credit for bare minimum behavior. And something magical happens. The men who would have wasted her time can no longer access her. This is where pain becomes power in the most practical sense. Every lesson learned, every boundary established, every pattern recognized becomes a filter that protects her future. She's not jaded or closed off. She's discerning. She hasn't built walls. She's built standards. She's not refusing love. She's refusing to call anything less than genuine partnership love. The psychology here is about moving from unconscious repetition to conscious choice. Most people repeat relationship patterns because they're unconscious of them. The woman who has done her healing work brings consciousness to every interaction. She notices when she's about to ignore a red flag and chooses differently. She recognizes when she's about to abandon herself for someone else's comfort and chooses herself instead. And let's talk about the power that comes from no longer needing a relationship to feel complete. This is perhaps the most profound shift of all. The woman who has turned her pain into power has discovered that she is not half of a whole waiting for someone to complete her. She is already complete. A relationship isn't something she needs, it's something she might choose if it adds value to an already fulfilling life. She understands that the right person will never ask her to shrink, to silence herself, to tolerate disrespect, to question her worth. The right person will meet her at her level of healing and consciousness. She stops trying to convince unavailable men to choose her and starts making herself unavailable to men who do not meet her standards. She's no longer auditioning for a role in someone else's life. She's the casting director of her own life, carefully selecting who gets access to her energy, her time, her body, her heart. The truth is that transforming pain into power isn't a destination, it's an ongoing practice. There will be days when the old wounds ache, when doubt creeps in, when she questions if she's being too picky or too guarded. But she's built enough trust with herself to know that these moments will pass, that feeling a feeling doesn't mean acting on it, that healing isn't linear. She has become the woman she needed when she was at her lowest, strong enough to hold herself through the pain, wise enough to extract the lessons, brave enough to keep her heart open without making herself vulnerable to the wrong people. If this resonates with you, If you've been on this journey of turning your pain into your greatest teacher, hit that like button as a way of acknowledging your own strength and growth. And if you're ready to keep doing this work, subscribe to this channel, because we're building a community of women who refuse to stay broken, who choose to become unbreakable instead. I'll be here every week with insights that will help you navigate relationships from a place of power rather than pain. You're not alone in this. You're part of a sisterhood of women who have walked through fire and emerged as phoenixes. I'll see you in the next one.